Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. David, brilliant to have you here from the other side of the world in Australia. And to start with, please introduce yourself and tell people about the great work that you do.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. It's great to be with you, and it's a real privilege to be talking to you from way down under, Melbourne, Australia. Look, I'm still working past the age of retirement, but I'm hoping I'll keep doing that for as long as I've got my health. Um, I run a disability business these days with my eldest daughter, and we take people out, we've got a number of people who work with us, and we take them out for community access and all that sort of thing. And on a Friday night, we take them out to do bowling or dinner, or sometimes the movies or something like that. And 4 times a year, we take one particular group away for 3 nights respite, which means that they go and stay somewhere. We do have a really good system in Australia called the NDIS. It was brought in some years ago for people with disabilities, so to try and help them and their families. So, and just another little background to that, and then I'll move on to the other stuff that we were going to talk about. Many years ago, it's probably the same in England, that people with disabilities were hidden away. It was really sad. I had a cousin who had never spoke, had quite a disability. He was 10 years older than me. My dear uncle and aunt used to do everything for him. They fed him, they bathed him, they shaved him, they dressed him. If they never had holidays,
Yeah,
um, because if they needed to go shopping, one would sit in the car with him, and the other one would go in because if he'd make a mess inside or it'd be embarrassing, or that's how the world was. So I'm so glad that at least we've moved on from that a fair bit.
here, here.
Um, yeah. The other side of what I do, Alan, and that's how we've connected, is I have a kindness movement that I'm struggling to get going. I've got a website, zorzle.org, www.zorzle.org, where I have a whole lot of things about kindness. And this all started with a book that I wrote a few years ago for children that I'm at the moment trying to get published through a publisher. I have had it on YouTube where I've I've got audio and so on, and I had it illustrated from the Philippines. But I kind of think I need to do better than what I've done. But that was about refugees, kind refugees from who knows where, and they're stick people, and they come to a lovely little village called Lingalonga Town, and everybody in Lingalonga Town is cuddly. But the people who come, these stick people, they're not cuddly at all. There's nothing about them that you can cuddle. And so the adults all try to get rid of them because they just don't fit in. They're so different. But it's the children who plead for them because they're so magically kind. When things have gone wrong, these people have just turned up and done sweet and lovely things. So it's a fairly short book, but from that came the idea to do a kindness movement that was actually led by children. And it's quite unique. I've never heard of anything else quite like that. What I initially wanted to do, Alan, was to develop apps and games. Kids are always on their phones, and we try to
Yeah,
keep them off their phones. But that's not going to change completely. Technology has moved so fast. So I wanted to produce apps and games and digital books that all taught empathy and kindness, and for that to grow virally, but with children sharing it with others all around the world. So that's the massive dream, and I keep plodding away.
well, I think I mentioned Jennifer Sharp to you, who's a publisher of children's books,
You
and
did.
she also is involved in a children-focused kindness initiative of some kind. I can't remember the
Yes.
detail, but it might be something worth thinking about. And then
I've
there's,
connected with her, Alan. I've
pardon?
connected with her.
Oh,
I've
good.
connected
Okay.
with her, had quite a lovely chat. and she's actually looking at that book of mine at the moment, and
Okay.
we'll keep talking. So
And then
thank
there's
you.
somebody else in Australia, the Be Kinder movement. Danny
Ah,
leads that, and that is focused on children in schools being kind. That
okay.
began as a result of a very sad incident when then I think 12 or 13-year-old daughter was killed in a horse
Mm,
accident. And so Danny runs this foundation in her honor. And she does amazing work. So there's another person in your country that it might be interesting to explore with.
thank
Um,
you.
and how might people get in touch with you if they're thinking, oh yeah, at least somebody understands disability, or I'm really interested in kindness too, or kindness and children is my thing, and so I can help David move along. How can they get in touch with you?
Probably the email address would be the easiest, and which is david@zorzle.org. So the
Okay.
website zorzle.org. I'm also on LinkedIn with I've got someone who's in Africa who's working with me, and we post a lot of kindness stuff on Facebook and on LinkedIn. And I'm also trying at the moment to get a podcast going on the subject of love, laughter, and kindness. So watch this space. Let's see what happens with that.
Great. Okay. So let's choose our Values Jam card. Here's the deck, and I'm just going to
Yes.
tip the cards out, and I'll give them a bit of a shuffle. And what I'm going to do is lay out a number of piles in front of me of these cards. So how many piles shall I make, David?
Well, it's only two of us. Make two piles.
Two piles. Okay, they're going to be different sizes. So if
Okay.
you go for the small one,
You're gonna
it'll
make
be
three. Make three.
all right. Three. Okay. And so pile one is on my left, pile three is
Yes.
on my right. So which pile? One, two, or three?
Two.
Two. Okay, and so now we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 17 cards. So a number between 1 and 17.
12.
Well, I'll go from the back then. 16,
Okay.
15, 14, 13. Number 12. Well, I mean, what did you say about your book?
Oh, wonderful. That's great. Beautiful. I
Oh my goodness,
love
I've just got a tingle down my neck. I mean,
it.
how does this happen? All right. So the first question is there's two parts to it. The first is more technical, and the second is more imaginative. So,
Okay.
what does inclusion mean? And the follow-up is what does it look, feel, and sound like? Start where
Well,
you wish.
yeah. Inclusion. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is it's not exclusion. It's the
Hmm.
opposite of that. And I can speak more about that. But you think of a school situation or a work situation or a family situation, anything, a church situation, where people are excluded for whatever reason, and then that can be racism. It can be something because they're black or because they're from an Asian country. And it's rarely the other way around, is it, that lovely white-skinned people like you and I are excluded for those reasons. But there might be other reasons. We could be gay, we could be whatever. So inclusion is the removal of judgment, so that people are on the same page together. We're all human.
Yeah, I love the simplicity of your statement, removal of judgment, because just going back to when you were describing your book, those
Mm.
stick people were excluded initially because they were
Yes.
different. And I can't remember the movie, but there's a movie about some like a space, it's the stereotypical cliche of a spaceship landing and an alien coming out of the spaceship. And so everybody's scared.
Mm.
And the initial reaction is shoot them. And it's like,
Yes.
why?
Yeah.
And there's something about inclusion. When I was listening to you start off, I wrote down celebrate difference.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
rather than think of it as a threat, it's like, hey, this is really interesting. Let's
Yeah,
explore and be curious about
yeah.
it. And what about and I'm guessing that you're going to be really strong on this because of your interest in poetry and the book that you described. When you think of the word inclusion, what images come to mind? What sounds come to mind? And what feelings come to mind?
Well, the feelings are good. The feelings are warmth. Um, they're you love feelings of the word embracing is coming to me. Like you're sort of you're in a place together. You're sharing on the same plateau. It's almost like the thing of the old people gathering around a fire
Yeah.
and um, and so it's a night sky, the fire's burning, there's the smell of the smoke and so on, and people are free to share. They're free to just be themselves, and there might be some dancing, there might be some music. It's a happy place.
And what about images when you think of the word inclusion?
I think of, well, I'm going to go a funny place in that I think of nature
Okay.
because in nature there is a sense of harmony.
Yeah.
I know that, in nature you have one animal killing another animal and those sorts of things. But generally, it's not for pure aggression or greed or things like that. It's just simply survival,
Yeah.
you know. And yeah, I think that's the sort of thing I would picture. That's those sort
And
of
then
images.
And I'll ask you about sound as well. You might say, well, I covered that in my campfire picture, which you might well have done, but do you want to add anything in the way of what sounds come to mind when you think about inclusion?
Well, I love music. I love all music. I love a whole variety of music. But I think of, and I also love classical music, of course. And I just think of a symphony. I always love the word symphony, by the way. I wrote the word symphony into a poem the other day. Um, yeah, I think of a symphony. We're just sitting there all together, may not know you. But I heard an interview on the radio the other day and they were talking about that. And they were saying, once it's over, I might be sitting next to you and we've never met before. And I might turn to you and say, that was wonderful, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And we're sharing that moment. So yeah.
I love that too. And I think there's a quote by somebody, their name is something like Lucock, or I can't remember, H. Lucock, something like that. Anyway, the quote is, it takes more than one to whistle a symphony,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really like.
Yeah.
And in terms of images and sounds and feelings for me, inclusion. So the image that comes to mind is, I don't know why, but I'm going to share it anyway. It's a doormat with the word welcome on it. And
That's nice.
it's this thing around, it doesn't matter what you are, where you're from, you're just welcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, then sound, uh, I probably have been influenced by you mentioning music, but I'm hearing a choir represented
Beautiful.
by people, from all walks of life and backgrounds, and singing in harmony,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
is a great sound, but also image actually. And then feelings about inclusion. Um, I think the feeling that comes to me is joy to be part of something where you are accepted, wholly accepted
Yes.
by the
Yeah.
people around you.
Yeah.
Um, and that it makes me feel a bit emotional, actually. I don't know why, but that sense of acceptance with no judgment
Mm.
just seems a very beautiful thing. Maybe it's because it's so rare. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is. Look, it is rare. You can find it in certain places, but no, it is rare. But what you talked about there with the choir and, as I mentioned, the symphony. I mean, all these people come together and they have all these talents and they may sing reasonably well. Many years ago, my wife and I sang in a choir in Melbourne, big one. And it was part of a gospel movement when I was going to church in those days. And they didn't rehearse anybody. Nobody had to audition, but we performed in the Hamer Hall, which is it's a large, theatre in Melbourne where they have symphonies, they have choirs, all that sort of thing. And it was glorious. It was just beautiful. So, we make up for each other. When you're together in that sort of way, my strengths may help you in some way. Your strengths will help me in
Yeah.
other ways. And, we're just one.
Yeah.
Beautiful, isn't it?
So let me ask you, I mean, I'm going to enjoy your perspective on this because you
Hmm.
operate in this space with your disability work. And then from some of the things you've said, it's obvious that you have a deep understanding of the importance of inclusion.
Mm.
So where I want to go with this is, when you were talking about being together at a concert or whatever and saying to the next person, wasn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Any difference between you doesn't matter because
No.
you're both focused on the music.
Yeah.
And yet, in society, we seem, in the absence of being able to focus on what is inspiring us all together, we focus on the concept of inclusion and exclusion.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it's done so badly that it actually reinforces the differences between people rather than getting them to come together in some sort of common inspiration when inclusion is the last thing on your mind. So
Yes.
what's your
Yes.
take on that, if I'm being clear?
I think that, I mean, one of the motivators of exclusion is fear.
Right.
And the moment you have fear, fear begets fear. Love begets fear. Love, love begets love. So, without being too political, just over the weekend, we've had the visit this week of the president of Israel. And there's been quite a movement against the invitation because we had that terrible um,
Yeah.
uh, murder
Yes.
scene of the Jewish folk in Bondi, which was
Yeah.
horrible, absolutely horrible. But of course, there's, and as I say, I don't want to be political, but there's all these people who wanted to protest against his being invited because of his history and the International Criminal Court and what's been happening in Gaza and all that sort of thing. Now, what they did in New South Wales and Sydney, and I'm in Melbourne, the Premier gave the police extra powers. And I was reading something today from a couple of people that I value who had been at the protest. And the police they were arm in arm, preventing the people from moving. Basically, they were kept in a very small area. And what this person was saying, and she's a very peaceful person, she and her husband, that the anger that was there had nowhere to dissipate because of
Yeah.
what was happening, you know. Whereas, and I actually commented back to her. I said, well, there must have been a lot of fear from the police because they had, I don't know how many police there, and they're all ready for conflict. And there were some terrible things that happened. We have on video, which a policeman, two policemen holding a person down and punching the person. The person can't do anything, and this policeman's just punching into them. Now, that's disgusting. It's un-Australian. But so I hope I'm not going too far here, but my point here is that that's exclusion, you know. Whereas if we can meet people, who disagree with us, and if we can hear them out. And that's the same when you're working with people with disabilities. Sometimes some of them have behaviors that aren't so good, you know. And I'm thinking of one person in particular who's probably got a child age of around 6, but they're fully grown adult. Now, if the person does something wrong and you challenge them on it, they can't cope because they can't communicate what they're feeling, why they've done what they've done, you know. So again, I mean, and to them, it's exclusion. If I
Yeah.
do that to them, that you're judging me, whereas I need a friend. I want somebody to be my friend. I want a dad. This person said to me a few times, I wish you were my dad. You know, it's very, it's lovely to hear, but it's also tough. Yeah, so how we approach people, how we hear them at all levels of society is how we build a good, welcoming, inclusive world. And
Yeah, I think
that's where kindness comes in. Sorry.
no, 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 it's okay. I think you're touching on some really important points here. I think there are at least three. I'll see if I can remember the three of them when I'm responding. Um, the first one about the behavior of the police.
Mm,
Um, I think we don't really understand the relationship between high profile government approved actions
yeah.
and the impact on societal behavior. And
Yes.
I'm going to give you an example from the UK, which I think is not dissimilar from the example that you've just given about the police, to make the point. So during COVID, uh, there was disgraceful behavior here by senior leaders in this country,
Yes, I
um,
remember some of it. Yeah.
flaunting the laws that they had
Yeah.
put in place. Now, several years later, probably it was sometime last year, we've got a local neighborhood app where people just, post stuff that's happening. And somebody posted about a fast food outlet where apparently a bunch of 10 teenagers entered the fast food outlet on their bicycles,
Mm,
and knocking people's food over, the chairs over, just causing a scene.
yeah.
But I've got this kind of intuitive theory that says if you're a young person and you see the most senior people in your world behaving against the law, why
Yeah.
should you live by the law anyway?
Absolutely.
And so,
Absolutely.
that police example of just restraining and not allowing people to air their opinion, that flows down into society and results in polarization and just
Yeah.
defending your corner rather than talking about stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's the first one. The second one is I was recently told about how explosives work.
Yeah.
And it was in the context of fireworks. And what they were saying was, in a commercial firework, it's in a cardboard container.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of able to get out reasonably easy. And it's designed for that purpose. And so it's kind of controlled.
Mm,
Whereas the example that was described to me was a metal cylinder packed with gunpowder,
yeah.
which behaved very unpredictably and was much more powerful than had been intended because of it being in a confined space and not being able to get
Yes.
out, which
Yes.
relates to your crowd control thing.
Mm,
So, if the police had taken a friendly approach and allowed people to not vent but express themselves,
yeah.
and maybe they would have been the equivalent of a more controllable firework in a cardboard container rather than
Mm,
what turned out to be an explosive situation in a cylinder.
yeah. Absolutely. I should say that the person who wrote these things said that the majority of people that they saw protesting were peaceful, but there were some who were very angry for different reasons, and
Yeah.
contained in that way that you've just described, they're ready to explode. And when they explode, it's going to be nasty.
Yeah. And then the third and final point, and I'm pleased that I remembered them all. When you were talking about the terrible situation at Bondi,
Yeah.
there, why do we tend to label everybody as the same because
Mm.
of something that they have in
Yeah.
common? You know,
Yeah.
what isn't it true that there are bad people? There are probably not very nice disabled people. There are probably not very nice Jewish people. There are
Yeah.
probably not very nice black and white and whatever
Of
people.
course. Of
So,
course.
but just because you come across somebody like that doesn't mean that you have the right to label everybody that's like them in that way, right?
That's right. I agree. Uh, you know, we it's what human beings do. I mean, I had a quite a I have quite a background story which I won't go into too much here, but I'll just mention that for about 20 years I was in a fundamentalist Christian group that I call a cult. And when the person who was in charge of it died, um, I was in charge. So I joke that I could have been God, but I looked at my resume, I looked at my strengths and my weaknesses, and I missed it by that much, as
So
Maxwell Smart would say.
you led a cult.
Yeah, I led it to till we closed it for 5 years after the person who
Gosh.
founded it did it. And I changed the nature of it from the day she died. I worked very hard to change it because it was so exclusive, you know,
Right.
family, friends outside, we weren't to mix with them or anything like that. Or be very limited with that. So from the moment she died, I worked very hard to change that to the point where I told people on Christmas Day that she died in the September. I said, you know, go to your family, stay as long as you want to. We used to go and we were told we could only have 2 hours or something ridiculous. And I used to say, stay as long as you want to, you're free. And they couldn't cope with it, some of them, because it was just such a big challenge. Um, so again, I mean, one of the reasons I do what I do is because it's many years ago now, because she died in 1990, and I led the close of the group and got everybody to recognise that it was a lot of BS that we'd believed and given money to, and our lives and all the rest of it. And everybody agreed, which was amazing. About 70 people. It was an extraordinary thing. Um,
Gosh.
but but so then I moved on from that. So that's 1995. And 97 it was when I started, um, um, moved to Melbourne and so on. But I see in an exclusive group, which that was, which believed that everything, we were right, everybody else was wrong. Um, there was a lot of love, there were a lot of kindness, there was a lot of equality, but there was also a lot of exclusion because if you were on the outside, you were on the outside and you were going to perish in hell for the rest of eternity and so on. How many groups have believed that sort of thing? And so uh, I look at kindness and I see that the best of all religion, doesn't matter what it is, the best of all religion is kind and loving and inclusive. It's a beautiful things in all kinds of religions. The worst of it is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And so our kindness movements can't be driven by religion. Religion can use the kindness, can be part of it, but it has to be apart from that.
Yeah,
That's my view.
I totally agree because if you look at any religion, kindness is at the root of them. True
Yeah,
kindness. It's
yeah,
just unfortunate that religion is sometimes applied incorrectly. In my view,
yeah.
I'm not a religious person, but now this notion of exclusion, inclusion, and in the context of wanting to create something that everybody is proud of and signed up to fascinates me. And
Mm,
I'm, we've just heard about the cult that you were involved in. My core work that I do is with organizations and creating strong values-led cultures. Now,
Yes.
it's always amused me that there's not much of a difference between the word culture and the word cult.
Me too.
And I know that when I'm working with an organization, a lot of the focus is on identifying behaviors that everybody's going to sign up to and
Yes.
everybody's going to live in order to represent the organization in the best possible way.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that if you overstep that strength a little bit, it does start to feel like a cult.
Yeah.
Um, and similarly, in the world of sport, I used to, I don't know if you call it football or soccer down there, but I used to coach kids. And I'm a pretty competitive person, and so you want your team to do well. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I want everybody to be included. And it saddened me to see teams that we were playing where there would be the kids on the touchline who probably weren't as good not getting a kick because the team wanted to win so much they just kept their best players on. So the way we dealt with that in the end was we had three teams. One team was chosen purely on merit, and the objective of that team was to win as much as they possibly could. The next team was for people that wanted to play, and it was not, it didn't disregard ability, but for instance, one of the things we said was that every child would play at least half a game, every child.
Yeah. Yes.
And so there's something about setting out your stall so that everybody knows rather than, trying to fudge things or pretend one thing and then behave differently. And in the context of inclusion, it feels like there's a lot of that going on where people are, pretending that they're inclusive, but they're not following through with that. Do
Yeah.
you, do you
Yeah.
experience that?
Look, I think that's always going to be a challenge because it's part of human nature that we all want the selfish side of us, if you like. I want this for me. Um, when you talk about the what you tried to do with the inclusion in the sporting arena, that's fantastic. Um, I'm a total sporting failure. My father loved his football. He loved his tennis. Sport was everything to him. But I'm afraid um, I, um, I remember I was in a play once because I love acting. I don't have time for it these days, but I love it. And I was in a play where I had to catch a baseball as part of the thing. And the director saying, "Now, which hand do you catch with?" And I looked at him in a very haughty voice. I said, "Neither of these hands catch." Um, but I was thinking as you're talking about that, I think it's in Denmark where they've changed the approach in school, whereas when I grew up, and it's still the case here, they've tried to change it a bit. Probably the same in Britain, I would imagine that you know you've got the children who do really well, and you used to have different classes. So in high school we had level one was the hardest top level. Everybody who got through that would definitely be going to university. Level two, well, nah, it's not quite as good. And level three was just to get through. And then children would be rewarded, or students would be rewarded for, you know, their marks. If they got the highest mark, they came top, naturally.
Yeah.
Well, apparently in Denmark, they changed it, and I hope I'm right about that, Denmark. I'm pretty sure it's Denmark. They changed it so that in the classroom, the child who was brilliant, but who then sat next to the child who needed help and helped them would be the one who received the award along with that person. So it was encouraging the nurture, the kindness, the empathy. And I think that's what we should be doing, in so many areas.
I totally agree. And again, it comes back to the systems that we use really are largely responsible for the individuals that we end up producing, if you want to
Yeah,
think of it in those terms.
absolutely.
And similar to what you were saying, I used an example recently where I was saying, if our school system is focused on individual achievement and performance, why are we surprised that we've got adults who are selfish and don't care about anybody else other than their own performance?
Yeah,
And then to take that step further, imagine if at school, instead of 5 days a week, you were focused on your own individual performance. Imagine if on day 5, you just did group work or
yeah,
community work together.
yeah,
Then
absolutely.
it just seems logical to me that what you would turn out is people that were more community and group minded.
Yeah,
But unless you put those systemic things in place, all of the individual goodwill is fighting against those systems that are in place. And to a certain extent, I think that that relates to inclusion and particularly disability.
mm,
Again, a key focus of mine is customer experience. So I remember having a conversation with a lady that ran a disabled organi- an organization for equality in the area of disability.
yeah,
And
yeah,
she was talking about the way that people with a disability were treated in organizations. And I was saying to her, don't think of it like that. Just think of it as, what does this person need?
mm,
Their disability is just part of their need. So if
yeah,
somebody is in a wheelchair, don't put a high reception desk to make them be looking at wooden
absolutely,
planks. But that's
absolutely.
not about focused on their disability. It's focused on their need as a customer,
Yeah,
which is, I don't know, it just seems fundamentally different and really the point. And I guess this is going back to that earlier point about if we could just focus on what we all want to move towards rather than inclusion in
mm.
itself, then perhaps we'd find it easier.
I had great hopes during COVID with all our lockdowns and so on, where the world, much of the world, I'm sure the same for you, was challenged because people couldn't go to work
Yeah,
lots of times, and the government had to step up and look after people. And um, I thought, well, maybe this is going to change how we operate. But sadly, what's happened is, in Australia at least, we've gone back to what we were before.
yeah,
Now, at the moment, this is, as you know, it's a vast country. I think it's still the biggest island in the world. Um, and yet we focus on keeping tax down. We don't, the billionaires can get away with murder. They can pay the least tax because of all the tax benefits that they can get and so
yeah,
on, you know. And of course, billionaires focus on what do they focus on? Making more and more and more and more money. And you think to yourself, how much do you need? You know, what's it all about? I could talk to you about the game of Monopoly, but maybe we can have a talk about that later because that actually, I believe, is that the mentality that's in the game of Monopoly is what has driven capitalism to be such a bad thing.
yeah. So again, it goes back to that, your environment defines you
Yeah,
ultimately,
yeah.
even though some people, do a very good job at pushing back against that.
Some
Uh,
people do, and you have to give credit for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, in ValuesJam, David, there's an opportunity for you to ask your own question about inclusion. So let's do that now. And the way this works is that I'm going to invite you shortly to ask that question. And either if you've got the answer on the top of your head, please do share that. Or if you'd rather direct the question to me and I answer first and then you respond, we can do that.
Sure.
So ask your own question about inclusion, beginning with who, what, where, when, why, or how.
Mm. Wow. I haven't even thought of that. So, um, can I ask about the UK in the sense of um, you've had healthcare, free healthcare for a long time. I have read and heard that it's not as good as it was intended to be, um, and yet it's still there. But I've also seen, and it's whatever you fed in the news, a fair bit about, the the opposition to immigrants coming in, refugees, and so on, when the UK has been so good in that area. So, what is the attitude there to inclusion, and how do you see that?
Yeah, wow. It's probably the answer to this question is probably above my pay grade, but I can give you a personal view, and I'm happy to do
Yeah,
that. So there is an increasingly popular, more right-wing, anti-immigration shift,
yeah,
and unfortunately, it's easy to play on because anytime a person who could be labelled an immigrant, even if they might not be, does something wrong, then the label is applied and fear is invoked. Um, and this is what happened a couple of elections ago, and also with when we left the European Union, that immigrant card was played really hard,
really strong.
and I think it's not fair. It's not very human, especially when you mention the care system and the NHS. When you go to be made better when you're poorly, the likelihood is that you're going to see a lot of people that are not necessarily immigrants themselves, but are here because of their heritage and
Yeah,
their past generations.
yeah,
And so in during COVID and also when we left the EU, what happened was a lot of Eastern European people left the UK.
yeah,
The hospitality industry was on its knees because a lot of those people had been in hospitality,
yeah,
and that disappointed and upset me personally because my first career was commercial hospitality management. I
yeah,
ended up running five-star hotels and conference centers and the like, and it was a brilliant, brilliant industry.
mm, mm,
What better industry than one that helps people enjoy themselves,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
what it does.
yeah.
And now
It has to
so
be
many people,
inclusive,
sorry,
and it has to be inclusive.
has to be inclusive without even mentioning the word.
No, yeah,
So for instance, I remember watching. His name was Carlos Ambrosini, Italian guy who ran the what was it called? The rare Can't remember the restaurant name, but it was the fine dining restaurant at the Cafe Royal in London. And I watched him carve smoked salmon at the table. When it was on the plate, you could see through it. It was so thin. But
yeah,
this was a guy who had been doing that for 25 years. And he said to me, it would be embarrassing if I wasn't good at it after practicing for all those years.
yeah, yeah.
And those sort of people were lost. And you
Mm,
can't replace them with somebody who has got a college degree and read a couple of books because they haven't had the 20 odd years of experience of becoming a master at what they do.
yeah,
So I kind of went off tangent there a bit, but in the UK there is this increasing movement against. Um, I just hope that we see common sense and don't get carried away with the negative side of patriotism that's sometimes invoked by that. Why were you curious about that?
um, because I see that as part of and we've got the same thing in Australia. We've got, a rising group of right-wing type people, and that many are right-wing. I don't like talking right-wing and left-wing, or wish we didn't need to talk like that. But
Yeah,
the attitude of, exclusion of immigrants and so on. But we need them, you know. And you go back to, like, I was born in the 1950s, and I remember growing up when you learned that the migrants who'd come here from Europe after the Second World War, and you had people from Italy, you had people from, Russia, you had people from Germany, you had all over the place. These people became the backbone of the
Okay.
country. They were
That's
doing work even back then, that the so-called Aussies who were there didn't want to do, you know. And how would we have, there's so many things I could talk about in that area. Um, a society that is embracing of and doesn't look for difference is going to be a much happier society. And so that's, I talked earlier about the kindness movement led by children. The reason that I sort of moved into that area was because I started to think, how are you going to change people of my age? How are you going to change people even
yeah,
20 years younger, even my children's ages? We've got to start with the children. And
totally
if
agree.
our if children grew with that, and really, you know what it is? It's the old golden rule, which is in all religions, and it's in humanitarianism. Do unto others as you do unto you, treat them as you'd want to be treated yourself.
Absolutely.
If we did that, as simple as it is, what kind of world would we have? You know?
Yeah,
It's so
totally agree. And for that reason, I'm just finalizing at the moment the design for Values Jam Junior, which is
wonderful.
designed for 4 to 11-year-olds. And
Fantastic.
I was convinced that it was possible for children to benefit because I visited my grandson, who was then 5,
Mm,
and I decided I was going to play. I used these cards because obviously
wow.
didn't have the other ones.
Yeah,
Um, and I thought, well, how am I going to play with him? So what I did was I said to him, Jacob, I'm going to show you these cards and I'm going to read out the word on each one. And your
yeah,
first job is to tell me the words that you know and the words that you don't know.
yeah,
So we made 2 piles. The words that he knew were the smaller pile. And
yeah,
then we went through the smaller pile, force ranking. So it was, Jacob, which is your favorite? Is it family or is it excitement? So we went through that process. And his favorite 3 cards were love, beauty, and kindness.
wow, wow. Isn't
And
that lovely?
then I said to him, let's choose one. We chose the card love. And I said to him, Are you, would you be able to explain to me what love means?
Mm.
And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, No, I can't explain it. So I said, Okay, that's fine. Can you tell me what you do to people who you love? And he said, I give them a hug.
That's beautiful.
And at
Yeah,
that moment, I thought, Values Jam Junior, I've got to do it.
yeah,
Because
absolutely.
exactly like you say, imagine kids coming out of school at that age having an understanding of each other's perspective of different values,
Mm.
like we've exchanged views today
Yeah,
at
yeah.
a different level. Yeah, so that's coming, which is probably a good moment for us to draw this values jam to a close. And the final question is this: what are you encouraged to do differently about inclusion as a result of our conversation today?
Well, I want to see those cards for a start, and I want to see your. I would love to know about your Values Jam Junior.
Okay.
When that comes out. Um, no, I'm just encouraged to continue on the path. I do get discouraged at times when I think that it's, am I gonna die before before I'll see some joy in this? But no, it's great to know that there are other people out there who are, and there are lots of people, as you know, who are on this same journey to try and make our world a kinder place. And I fail, like we all do. I fail at times on the in the inclusion area. You have a thought, and the thought is, a negative thought about someone. Maybe you've just met them. Maybe it's someone you work with. And if I can recognize that and then tame it, you know, deal with it, um, then that's good. That's great. The trouble is, it, the problem is when people don't recognize that and they just embrace that thought. And then, and even with people who work with us, something happens, as I said earlier, about one of the clients or something, and you go into it, you leap to judgment. You should not have done that, you know.
Yeah,
And sure, they shouldn't have done it. But actually, a lot of times people know when they've done something wrong. They don't really need you to beat them up about it. They need you to recognize they've made a mistake, recognize that they're sorry, even if they don't express it, and help them through it.
dead right. And you've reminded me of I've never kind of verified this, but I was told that in Zulu culture, when a teenager does something wrong, what they do is the elders form a circle around the teenager, and then
Yeah,
they tell them of the good things that they've done.
yeah, I've heard that.
So it just
I've
goes
heard
around the
that.
circle. This kid in the middle is like embarrassed to hell because
Yeah,
it's like they're just being
absolutely.
told all these wonderful stories, and that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah. It's so true. It's so
And
true.
so, okay, well, thank you for your interest in the card game. Actually, we have a distributor in Australia. So
Great.
I'm going to send you the link to the website. And if you would like to place an order, I'm going to put an extra gift deck in the pack so that you can think about how you might use it with some of your disabled people,
Yeah,
because it might be that there's a way for them to enjoy Values Jam in a way that you think is appropriate. So if that's something that's of interest, just well, we can sort that out, and I'll arrange to have that extra deck put in. What am I encouraged to do different about inclusion? Um, I think. Oh, sorry. One other thing I wanted to mention. You said, "Am I going to die before there's very much joy and all this sort of thing?" I would
yeah,
encourage you to ask yourself this question when you've got like a spare 10 or 15 minutes and you've got nobody to talk to and all of
yeah.
this. Um, what is there in the world that would not be in the world if you didn't exist?
Mm, it's a good
Because
question.
it's a really good way to balance out that thing about, we're all striving to do more and
Yes.
feeling
Yeah,
we're not
yeah,
doing everything that we could, but
yeah.
then to get the other side of that coin about what has happened because of you. I think you might enjoy and benefit from doing that. And then for inclusion, it's encouraging me to continue to explore how I can make the connection between my values work and inclusion, because just like we were talking about the either the sports event or the
Mm,
music event where your differences don't matter, I think if we're able to inspire people to to live certain values, then their differences become less relevant, because it doesn't
absolutely.
matter what background you're for. We're all just striving for kindness.
Yes, yes.
So, David, thanks for how would I summarize this? We've been very inclusive actually in our discussion because we've
We
really
have, haven't
gone
we?
very broad and covered a lot of topics. And actually, you've raised some very profound thoughts. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh, well, I've really enjoyed it as well. Thanks so much for inviting me, Alan.
Cheers.
Cheers.